This is the drawing of the hammer that we're going to build. It's actually a 1-to-1 scale drawing, so this should be the exact finished dimensions. Every student got one of these when we started, and there's always lots of copies around. You'll notice the finished dimensions that are on that. At the bottom, overall dimension of the handle at finished dimensions, 8.5 inches. Go up top to the finished dimension of the head is 3.5 or 3.5 inches. Thing to remember when you're cutting these pieces out is to cut them a little longer than those finished dimensions. The handle, you're going to center drill each end of that handle so that it will be able to be supported when you're turning it on the lathe. That material that you've center drilled is waste. It's going to be machined off when you're finished. So add on to that, about 1/2 inch in each end will give you lots. So cut it at about 9.5 inches, give or take. Same thing with the head. You're going to cut it. Finished dimensions 3.5, but one end you're going to have to true up and square. So you're going to lose a little bit of material there. And also, if you look down here at the other end, the layout for it is 3/6/875, pretty close. So you need to draw it, cut it at least that long, or a little bit longer than that, so that when you do that line, when you're laying out, you can actually scribe the line right to the end. Because what you're going to do is find center on that piece at that distance. Right, that first end, everything's going to be squared up and true, so all the measurements come from the same spot. Measure from that good end out your 3.6875. That's where you're going to scribe the line to. And then later on, we're going to bring it back. When it's all done, it should look something like that. This one is pretty close. Overall dimensions, this one's actually 8.5 right on. The hammer head on it is 3.5 right on. Everything's where it should be. The only difference is on this one, the only real mistake is that angle right here. If you noticed on the drawing, it says 11 degrees. This one isn't 11 degrees. The taper doesn't quite line up. If I get this here, doesn't quite line up. So that's the only big mistake on this one. Other than that, it's pretty good. Okay, the head cut at about 3 3/4. And the piece for the handle, we are cutting about 9 3/4. After you've cut it off with the bandsaw, there's going to be, I don't know if I can get focused here, there's going to be a rough surface from the teeth on the saw cutting through it. There we go. Next step is going to be, oh there we go, that zoomed in on it. File the end of this to get it nice and square and flat and smooth. We're going to cross file first to remove material a lot quicker. At this point, we're not worried about putting a finished super shiny end on this. All we want to do is have it nice and square and flat. That end is going to be your baseline. That's where you're going to take all of your measurements from to do the rest of the layout. First trick is make sure it's as close to straight up and down in the vise as you can get it, because we work on trying to file flat. And if we're not filing flat, we're not going to get a flat surface. We're going to start with a fairly coarse file because we want to remove quite a bit of material here fairly quickly. If we use a coarse file, it'll get us there that much quicker. So we're going to put first, grab the file in one hand, left-handed or right-handed, it doesn't matter. I'm a lefty, but hold it in one hand, put your index finger on the top. That's going to help to keep your file oriented perfectly flat. Without that, you can be pretty much anywhere and not know it. This indexes it. Indexing finger. Hey, coincidence? The other end you hold with your other hand. And long strokes. Use the entire length of the file so you get more work done for the same amount of effort. Now we're cross-filing as we go, which means we're going on that diagonal. So I'm starting here at the tip. I'm going forward, so it's going basically that way and that way at the same time. Long strokes, and it'll come down pretty quick. And as you watch the surface, you'll see those scratches start to disappear. You may, if it was uneven, see some spots that haven't been touched yet. No problem, just keep going until the whole surface is perfectly flat and smooth. A couple of things to watch for when you're filing. Make sure that when you're filing, you don't get starting to do a bowing action as you're doing it. Some people will do this or the other way. The idea is to keep this file perfectly flat as you're going. Now, that's what the finger on top helps with. But one thing, if you get both feet up really close, and you're trying to do this here, just because of body mechanics, if I'm too close, when I pull that elbow back, it's going to go up. So, exaggerated, it would be doing that. So put that 1 foot back so that you have enough length that your arm can go perfectly straight where you're trying to go. A lot of you may find that you have a tendency to be heavy one way or the other. Either going this way, and again, these are all exaggerated, or too heavy going that way. If you find that, and some of you might find you start chasing this. You go, oh, it's too low here. Try and chase it, and take it too far there, and then too far here. Check it often so that you don't go past where you want. But if you tend to be heavy one way or the other, do a little bit one direction, then turn around and come from the opposite direction. If you have a tendency to be heavy one-handed or the other, that should counteract it. You can even go from the third side and the fourth side, right? You can do it from any direction, and it'll counteract that tendency to go heavier one side or the other. If you find that it is going crooked, stop. Take a look, what side's the low side? Pay attention to it. If this was my low side over here and this was my high side, when I go to file, make sure this is as straight as I can, and as I do it, I should only see material being removed from the high side. If that was low and I'm doing this and it looks like I'm taking it off the whole surface, I'm not doing it straight. Angle this slightly if you have to. Not so much angle it as put more pressure on that side than the other. But pay attention. You'll see the scratches forming as you're filing. If they're forming more scratches on the side that's already low, you have to adjust. Okay, and then again, check for burrs on the side, because when you go to check this with the square, they're going to make the square hold out a little bit from that side. Okay, once you think you've got it pretty good, you're going to check it with a square. Put the flat part of the square against the side of your material. Slide it down so the ruler is touching the top. What you're looking for is if you can see any light under either side of this. And I'll bring it up closer so you can see. Nice and straight, no light showing there. And if there's a lot of shadow or it's not very light where you're at, hold it towards, well, in this case, a window. I can hold it this way, and if there's anything light showing on either side, or if it's low in the middle, whichever, I don't know how you'd have got that done, but it'll show up. Then turn it 90 degrees, do it, because it could be perfectly straight one way, but on an angle. So, check it one way. Okay, no light showing underneath there. Nice and straight. Turn it, check it, make sure it's nice and square. At this point, it should be nice and smooth and flat. There may still be some rougher marks from the coarse file, but you're going to take care of that when you do your finishing on it. At this point, that's good. The other end, don't worry about it. Remember, we're going to cut a point on this, or a taper on both sides. That other end is going to be machined away. You don't have to worry about it. Just worry about getting that first side perfectly smooth and flat and square. That's going to be the baseline. You're going to take all your measurements from that side. So you want it as good as you can to begin. Now that we've got that in nice and square and flat, the next step is going to be to file off the mill scale on the side. It's got that black mill scale because it's hot rolled steel on every side. And we need to get it off so we can do our layout. Well, actually, we need to remove it from everywhere. But when we try to scribe our layout lines on this, if we try to scribe on this, it has a tendency to flake and you don't get a nice crisp line. So we got to file all four sides, put it in the vise the same as before. And again, just like always, try and have it as level as you can when you go to do this. It makes, if you've got the technique of keeping this file flat and it's flat, it makes it a lot easier. And again, same as before, you're going to cross file, going the full length, using the entire length of the file, all in one stroke, helps keep it straight. Other thing, well, we already mentioned about the analogy of a knife and cutting and slicing. But the other thing to remember is cross file, don't just do one end or the other or a little bit in the middle and hope I'll get here. You'll end up getting ups and downs. You won't get a nice flat surface. And again, could be from this direction. All depends if you're left and right-handed. You're going to do that until that is, all the mill scale's gone and all the scratches that you see in that are nice and consistent. The next step is going to be to do the layout on this of the parts that are going to be machined away for that taper on the end of that hammerhead. What we're going to do is take Dykem Blue, knock off most of it here into the jar, and we're only going to do the layout on one side. That should do everything we need. We just put a little layer everywhere. There we go, close enough. And then it'll take a couple of minutes for that to dry, and then we'll come back and show the next step. The Dykem is all dry now. You can touch it, nothing comes off on your hands. If you get this on your hands when it's wet, go wash them right away before it dries. Makes it a lot easier for it to come off. If you don't have the layout die, you can use something else. Something I use quite a bit at my home shop is a Sharpie. Draw on the Sharpie in the area that you need to scribe your lines. Let it dry, does the same thing. The whole point of the layout die is to give a good contrast so you can see the lines that you scribe into it when you do your layout. If you try to just scribe the line on the shiny steel, they're really hard to see. Scribed against the dark blue background, they really stand out. When we look at our drawing, the first number we're going to look at is from the face where you've squared it up to where this taper is going to begin. All I've done, set my caliper to that measurement. come on here from my good end, make sure it's here. I'm just going to make a tiny little mark. Once I've got that mark, I'm going to use the square, put it on here, line it up perfectly with the edge of that mark, hold it in tight against the side of it so this doesn't move. Scribe a line straight across. And there you can see how much better it stands out. Then I do the same thing for the next measurement, which is the full length of what I need for the layout, 36875. Set that on my caliper. Again, go from my good end, where all my measurements are coming from, my baseline, put it on here. Make a very small mark. Set that aside. Grab my square right to that line. Scribe that one. Same way. Next thing I need to do is find center on this line. So to find center, I know this is 3/4 inch material. Half of 3/4 is 3/8. I set my square up, set it on here. Scribe a line there, right in the center, wherever it is. Now, I did that from this side. If I'm off a little bit on this, or if I took more off of this than I expected when I filed it, turn it around, do the same thing from the other side. If one or the other is off slightly, it would leave two little lines. Center would be in between those two, or you could readjust this slightly back to where you need. Here, it just left the one line. I know I'm center. Now is a little bit trickier part. What we're going to do, bring this up here where you can see it. We're going to scribe a line from this center mark. Oh, we're getting blurry. What we're going to do now is scribe a line from that mark at center. I keep losing focus here. To where this line meets the edge. Then the same thing on this side, from where this meets, this is center, to where this side meets the edge. I'll do it here. I'll try and have you guys see, but my hands are probably going to be in the way. So there's my center. And what I'm going to do, I should have my reading glasses on to see this. I'm going to set my scribe right on where those lines cross. That way I only have to worry about lining up the other end, right where that meets the edge. Oh, and I moved. Haha. When I went to scribe, there we go. Right along there. Then I flip it around, do the same thing this way. From center, and I'm going to put this scribe on that cross again. Put the ruler against it. Get out to where that line meets the edge. I didn't move that time. Scribe my line. That should look very much like what this does. The next step for this head is going to be taking it to the milling machine. We're going to set it up and machine away the parts that are on the outside of those lines. It should leave us with this coming to a sharp point, which we're going to machine away because the finished dimension is only going to be 3.5. So roughly about there. But it also has, if you look at the drawing, a rounded end when finished. But if we went just to that point, we'd have that sharp point at 3.5. So we have to go further than the finished dimension with the layout and then machine away the extra after. So what I've got, parallel sitting on top of the jaws, put the piece in the jaws and line up my scribe line perfectly with that parallel. If I move it away, I'm going to see if I can get in here close. If I move it just a little bit, it's hard to see the line from this angle, but that lines up perfectly with the top of the parallel. Then I move the parallel away because we don't want to machine into it. And the reason I use the parallel to space that line up instead of lining it up with the top of the jaws of the vise is then when I'm machining, I run the risk of running the cutting tool into the vise and chewing it up, which if you look right here, someone took a little bite there at one point. This may get noisy when I turn this on, but what I'm going to do now, I'll turn on the machine, take a small cut here, come back, finish it. I think my piece is just a touch wider than that end mill. We'll do a little bit, and maybe I'll turn you around this way, see what's happening there. And then what we're going to do is machine in little bites at a time until we're right at our line. Move this out some. Finish there. Raise this, and I'm not raising the knee very much each cut. Quarter of a turn or so. And back for the same cut. Now I'm doing this dry so that you guys can see what I'm doing. Normally I would have oil bath on this so you could see, or so it would make the end mill last a lot longer. Come back. Biggest thing to remember here, once you get really close to that line, take smaller bites so you don't go beyond it. Something I did want to point out is when I'm traveling this direction, on the back edge, going conventional doesn't leave a burr on the edge. When I get to this end and bring it out to return, I'm actually climb milling. It's a trick I watched from one of the Joe Pazinski videos where the climb milling on the return doesn't leave a burr on the edge like conventional milling would. Less cleanup, less burrs, less chances of a student cutting themselves. And no blood on the floor is always a good thing. And you can see now that we're up close, we machined right down and stopped exactly on our line that we have for our layout. Now let's just flip it over and do the same thing to the other side. Okay, for this one we switched over to the other mill. We could have stayed on that one, I just wanted to show as many different pieces of equipment as we can as we go through this. Again, parallel, lined up perfectly with our line. Ooh, if we didn't get blurry, there we go. So that line is perfectly horizontal to the jaws anyway. Move it out of the way and do the same as the other side. Now on here, everything works the same as on the other mill. Our cutting tool here is a little narrower than that one. If we're going to do it in just 2 passes, we have to be careful where we line up. And this cut should put us pretty much right on our line. Notice it's a very small cut. And we now have just a little touch down the center. And there we go. That side is done. Should be exactly like our drawing.